Intro tonight. I invite you to set aside the weight of the day. Close your eyes. Feel the rise and fall of your breath, and allow your thoughts to drift into the gentle glow of a flickering fire. You are safe. You are warm. And you are about to take a slow, soothing journey through history, where shadows of the past whisper softly, and forgotten stories return like fading echoes. Part 1. Fredegund of Neustria. History is not always sharp edges and loud voices. Sometimes it is a tapestry woven with whispers, secrets, and silence. Tonight, we begin with a queen. A woman both feared and remembered. Her name was Fredegund of Neustria. She was born around the year 547 in obscurity. A servant girl, unnoticed, living at the edge of greatness. And yet, history would remember her as one of the most ruthless women to ever wear a crown. Imagine the Frankish court. Vast wooden halls lit by torches, filled with the murmur of men plotting, women whispering, children watching silently from corners. At the very edges of this world stood Fredegund, listening, learning, waiting. She caught the eye of King Chilperic I, at first a servant, then a consort, then a queen. But queenship was never safe, and Fredegund knew survival meant striking first. Her rivals disappeared, some through scandal, some through blood. Queen Audovera, gone. Princess Galsvintha, strangled in her bed. Stepchildren who stood between her sons and the throne. Silenced forever. Fredegund's name became a whisper of fear. Enemies avoided her. Allies respected her. She was both shadow and steel. Her greatest rival was Brunhild of Austrasia. Two queens locked in a silent war, pulling kingdoms into endless battles. Letters filled with venom. Armies marching at their command. A feud that spanned decades, shaping the destiny of nations. Even her husband, King Chilperic, could not escape. In 584, he was murdered, stabbed after a hunt. Some said enemies. Others whispered Fredegund. But she survived, ruling as regent for her son, Clotaire II. And though her reign was filled with shadows, she succeeded. Her son would one day unite the Frankish throne. Her legacy was written not in love, but in blood. When she died in 597, she left behind not peace, but power. A servant who became a queen who became a shadow of fear. Now, her story fades like a candle in the night. A whisper, a flicker, a memory. Part 2. Roman drinking games. Now let us drift further back, to ancient Rome, a city of marble, fountains, and endless feasts. The Romans loved wine. To them, it was not just a drink, but a way of life. In their banquets, they invented games, playful, strange, and sometimes foolish. The most famous was Kottabos. Picture a dining hall lit by oil lamps, mosaics glittering beneath reclining guests. Each guest swirled the last drops of wine in their cup, then flicked them across the room at a bronze disc balanced on a pole. If the drops struck true, the disc rang like a bell. The crowd cheered, laughed, or teased. But there was more. Players often whispered the name of a lover before they threw. If the wine hit the mark, it meant love returned. If not, laughter filled the air, and perhaps a blush colored someone's cheeks. Roman banquets lasted for hours. Musicians played soft notes on lyres. Poets recited verses. Slaves poured endless cups. Wine mixed with honey, herbs, even seawater. Philosophers said 3 cups were enough. 1 for health, 1 for pleasure, 1 for sleep. But the Romans rarely stopped at 3. Think now, not of drunken noise, but of softness. The sound of wine pouring, the quiet hum of music, the glow of lamps reflected on marble. In these moments, joy, intoxication, and dreams drifted together, until the guests, like you now, were carried gently into sleep. Part 3. The death of Alexander the Great now, further still. To Babylon, to the summer of 323 BCE. Here lay a man who conquered much of the known world. A man who never lost a battle, Alexander the Great. At only 32, his body bore the scars of endless wars. Yet his dreams were vast. Arabia, Rome, worlds still to conquer. One evening, he feasted with his companions. Wine flowed, laughter rose. But then, fever struck. For 12 days, Alexander lingered. Physicians tried remedies. Generals prayed. Soldiers wept. Nothing saved him. Whispers spread. Poison? Or fever from the marshes? No one knew. As he grew weaker, his generals asked, "To whom do you leave your empire?" His fading breath answered, "To the strongest." And with those words, he sealed the fate of his world. On the 12th day, he could not speak. One by one, soldiers passed by his bed, thousands filing silently through the chamber, gazing upon their dying king. And then, in the stillness of night, Alexander, Lord of Asia, Pharaoh of Egypt, King of Kings, breathed his last. The conqueror of the world was gone, but his name remained, not as a man, not as a king, but as a legend. Part 4. The inaugural games of the Colosseum. Now, let us walk into the heart of Rome again, to the greatest amphitheater the world has ever known, the Colosseum. It is the year 80 CE. Emperor Titus stands before his people. 50,000 citizens fill the seats. The games will last 100 days. The gates open. First come the animals: lions, leopards, elephants, bears. The crowd gasps. Children cheer. Then hunters enter. Man against beast. Spears against claws. The sand shifts beneath their struggle. Later come the gladiators. Pairs of men with swords, shields, tridents, nets. The people roar, cheering with their favorites. A gesture from the emperor decides life or death. And then, amazement. The arena floods with water. Wooden ships clash in mock naval battles. The sea itself has come to Rome. For 100 days, the Colosseum thundered with life. A city united in awe. Rome eternal. Rome unshaken. But centuries passed. The voices faded. The stones crumbled. Now the Colosseum stands silent beneath the stars. A ruin, yet eternal. Its arches whispering memories of cheers long gone. So tonight, when you think of those inaugural games, imagine not blood nor violence, but wonder. The awe of a people united beneath the endless sky. And so, our journey comes to an end. From the shadows of a queen, to the laughter of Roman feasts, to the final breath of a conqueror, and the roaring crowds of an eternal city. Now the stories fade, like flames dimming in the hearth. Their whispers grow softer, carried away by the night. And you are left in peace, calm, safe, resting, drifting into the deep, gentle sleep of history's embrace. Chapter 5. Echoes of Forgotten Kingdoms. As the fire of history dims to embers, we wander into the echoes of kingdoms long forgotten. Their walls have crumbled into dust, their palaces swallowed by roots and silence. Yet their voices remain, a faint murmur beneath the weight of centuries. Imagine the great halls of Egypt, where pharaohs once walked among columns carved with stories of gods and rivers. The golden sun lit their temples, and the Nile carried the lifeblood of a civilization that believed itself eternal. Yet today, the sand covers their whispers, leaving only broken statues staring into the horizon. Across the east, The mighty Persian Empire stretched with roads and gardens, its rulers commanding armies and poets alike. In Persepolis, fires once blazed for ceremonies of kingship, but Alexander's march turned its splendor into ash. Still, the stones remember. Walk among them, and you can almost hear the chants of forgotten priests, the rustle of silk, the fragrance of incense fading into the night. To the north, the Goths, the Vandals, and tribes whose names survive only in fragments of chronicles. Carved lives in forests and mountains. Their songs were carried by the wind, their courage etched in battles long erased. Though they left no grand pyramids, their legacy rests in the bones of Europe, in languages and bloodlines that endure. What ties these vanished worlds together is not their power, nor their wealth, but the reminder that nothing lasts. Even the grandest throne will one day be empty. Even the loudest voice will soften into a whisper. Yet in that impermanence, there's a strange kind of peace. For if empires fall, so too do sorrows. If marble cracks, so too does fear. Tonight, as you drift into rest, let these echoes guide you, not to mourning for what is lost, but crown. In the age before memory, when kingdoms were carved by sword and faith, there rose a realm known as Eldoria. It was a land draped in mist and mystery, its valleys fertile with grain and song, its mountains crowned in snow that never melted. Travelers spoke of Eldoria as though it were both blessing and curse. Blessing for its beauty, curse for the secret that weighed upon its throne. The people of Eldoria told stories of the Silent Crown, a relic forged in the dawn of time. Unlike the jeweled circlets of lesser kings, this crown bore no gold, no ruby, no sapphire. It was wrought of black iron and etched with runes that no sage could decipher. It did not glitter in sunlight. It absorbed it, as if hungering for the warmth it denied. Legends whispered that the crown did not rest upon a ruler's head, but upon his soul. Whoever bore it became both sovereign and prisoner, for the crown's silence was a vow, never to speak of the covenant that bound kingdom and forest, life and death, man and shadow. Generations of monarchs carried the silent crown, and each was said to grow quieter with age. Kings who once gave rousing speeches to armies ended their reigns in muttered prayers. Queens who had sung to their people in celebration finished their days with sealed lips and eyes that lingered on horizons unseen. The crown gave them power. Of that, none doubted. Yet it also drained them, as if every word left unspoken was a toll paid to some hidden keeper of fate. Eldoria prospered nonetheless. Its rivers ran silver with fish, its forests thick with deer and boar, its forges hot with iron drawn from veins deep in the mountains. Bards called it the Kingdom of Plenty. Merchants filled its markets with spices, silk, and wine. Yet in every feast, at every coronation, the silent crown was a shadow, reminding all that their fortune was not their own. It was borrowed. The present king, Aldemar the Just, was unlike his forebears. Where silence had claimed the voices of past rulers, Aldemar still spoke often. He walked among his people, listening to their grievances, settling disputes with fairness and laughter. Farmers blessed him, knights swore loyalty to him, and even the monasteries that once feared the crown began to hope that perhaps Aldemar had broken its curse. But in the heart of the royal palace stood the Hall of Echoes, where no torch burned and no scribe dared write. There, upon an altar of stone blackened by centuries, the silent crown waited when not in use. and though Aldemar had sworn never to wear it except in ritual, the servants whispered of nights when he wandered alone to the hall, placing the crown upon his brow, standing for hours unmoving, as though listening to a voice none else could hear. On such nights, the torches of the palace flickered without wind. The hounds of the courtyard howled, though no stranger approached, and the king's eyes, once warm and brown, returned to his chambers colder, shadowed, as though he had glimpsed a future too heavy to name. It was on a winter's eve, when snow smothered the fields and the hearths of the city burned bright, that Aldemar summoned his court. Nobles gathered beneath banners of crimson and gold. Knights knelt, priests blessed, and common folk pressed against the gates to hear the news. The king rose, crownless, his voice strong yet strained. "My people," he began, "our kingdom stands on the edge of silence. The covenant of old stirs once more. I feel it in the stones of this palace, in the roots of the forest, in the air we breathe. A vow forgotten now seeks its due." The hall fell still. Not even the crackle of fire dared speak. And then, with a trembling hand, Aldemar pointed toward the north, toward the forests where mist hung like a veil and the mountains brooded like sentinels. "It is there," he said, "that our fate lies waiting." Thus began the tale of the silent crown, and the knight who would one day bear its burden. His mother, a seamstress, who stitched cloaks for merchants and priests. Yet from childhood, Alaric's gaze lingered not on stone or thread, but on the horizon, where forests whispered and mountains clawed at the sky. He grew restless among the narrow streets, restless beneath the weight of ordinary life. When he came of age, he took up the sword, swearing loyalty not to gold nor crown, but to the road itself. It was said that the forest beyond Eldoria's northern border was not a place for men. Maps marked it as the Wordwood, shaded in ink darker than seas or deserts, with no towns, no paths, only a warning written in runes. Enter not, for silence reigns. Yet when King Aldemar's words spread through the realm, that fate itself slumbered in the north. It was Alaric who saddled his horse and set his heart upon the journey. The road began kindly enough. Fields rolled like green oceans, villages dotted the valleys, and shepherds lifted their hands in blessing as he passed. Children ran alongside his horse, laughing, asking for tales of dragons and duels. To each, he offered a smile, though his thoughts lingered on the weight of the king's prophecy. Days stretched into weeks. The sky grew colder, the air sharper. By the time Alaric reached the last village before the northern wood, winter had claimed the land. The villagers, gaunt and hollow-eyed, warned him to turn back. "The forest is not dark," an old woman whispered, clutching his arm with bony fingers. "It is empty, and emptiness is worse than darkness. At least in darkness, something lives. In silence, nothing survives." But Alaric pressed on. The first steps into the forest were like walking into another world. Snow did not crunch. Leaves did not rustle. The forest floor absorbed every sound, as if the earth itself were listening. His horse's breath steamed in the cold, but even the beast grew uneasy, ears twitching, hooves hesitant. Alaric dismounted and walked beside it, each step sinking into silence so complete that he could hear the blood in his own veins. Towering oaks stretched above him, their branches twisted into shapes like grasping hands. Moss clung to their bark in shades of green so dark they seemed black. No bird sang, no insect stirred, no wolf howled. The silence was a living thing, heavy upon his chest, pressing into his ears until he longed for the clamor of war, the ring of steel, anything but this void. As hours turned into days, the silence began to play tricks. He thought he heard whispers, not spoken, but breathed into his thoughts. Images drifted through his mind, a crown of black iron, roots curling like chains, eyes in the dark that never blinked. He shook them off, gripping his sword, reminding himself he was Alaric of Thalanor, sworn to no fear. Yet the forest seemed to know him better than he knew himself. On the third night, as frost rimed the trees and the stars hid behind a veil of cloud, Alaric found a clearing. At its center stood an oak so massive it dwarfed all others, its trunk wide enough to house a chapel, its roots spreading like rivers frozen in the earth. Upon its bark were carvings, not made by axe or blade, but etched as though the tree itself had grown them. Spirals upon spirals, runes older than kingdoms, older than kings. When Alaric laid his hand upon the trunk, the silence broke, not with sound, but with thought, an echo not his own filling his mind. You wear no crown, yet you carry its shadow. You are not chosen, yet you are called. The covenant waits, knight of stone and seam. Alaric staggered back, sword drawn, eyes darting through the stillness. But there was nothing. No figure, no foe. Only the oak, vast and eternal, its roots whispering in silence. He did not sleep that night. By dawn, he knew the forest would not let him leave unchanged. And so, he pressed deeper, carrying not just his sword, but the weight of whispers, toward a fate older than his name. The monastery of Ardent Hollow clung to the cliffs like a bird's nest of stone, battered by winds that carried the scent of pine and snow. Its bells had not tolled in generations. The monks who dwelled within had sworn themselves to silence so complete that even their footsteps seemed to vanish in the echoing halls. Alaric arrived at dusk, weary from days of wandering the Wordwood. His cloak was stiff with frost, his horse gaunt from lack of pasture. The great oak's whispers still haunted him, words without sound, meaning without voice. He sought the wisdom of the monks, for it was said they guarded prophecies older than Eldoria itself. The gates opened with a groan, as though the stone remembered 1,000 years of secrets. Hooded figures greeted him not with words, but with gestures, offering food, water, and rest. Yet their eyes lingered on him too long, as if they recognized something in his shadow. That night, he was led to the Chamber of Echoes, a cavern beneath the monastery, where walls glittered with veins of crystal. There, the monks broke their silence, speaking not with their mouths, but with voices that poured directly into his thoughts. "You carry the mark of the crown," the voices said as one. "The silent crown has stirred, and with it, the covenant of roots. The prophecy is clear. When silence walks among men, the shadow of the old king shall return." Alaric knelt, overwhelmed by the weight of words he could not understand. "I am no king," he whispered aloud, his own voice startling him in the cavern. "I seek only to serve my realm." The crystals glowed faintly, pulsing like heartbeats. "Service is the path, yet the path is not yours alone. You will walk with the forest, with the dead, with the forgotten. And when the crown rests upon silence once more, you must choose. Break the covenant, or bind the world anew." The voices faded. The chamber returned to stillness. When Alaric rose, the monks were gone. He stood alone beneath the glittering walls, his heart pounding, his mind echoing with prophecy. He did not know whether he was chosen or cursed, but he knew one thing with certainty. His journey had only begun. And somewhere in the north, beyond forest and stone, something ancient had awakened. Chapter 4. The Shadow of the Old King. The chronicles of Eldoria spoke little of the Old King. His name was scratched from scrolls, his likeness erased from murals, his tomb unmarked. Yet his shadow lingered in whispers of a monarch who defied the Covenant, who sought not to guard silence, but to master it. Alaric's path wound through ruins forgotten by mapmakers, villages swallowed by ivy, towers leaning like weary giants. The people he met on the road spoke of strange happenings. Cattle born without sound, rivers running still as glass, dreams filled with crowns and roots. Fear traveled faster than winter. One night, as Alaric camped beside the remains of a broken watchtower, he felt the air grow heavy. The fire he built burned low, though wood was plenty. His horse stamped nervously, nostrils flaring. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. Clad in armor black as night, the man's face was hidden by a helm crowned with jagged iron. His presence chilled the marrow, as if death itself walked clothed in steel. "You seek the Covenant," the figure's voice rasped, not carried by lips, but by the silence between heartbeats. "But the Covenant is mine." Alaric drew his sword, the blade quivering in his grip. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, and though the firelight barely touched him, Alaric felt as though centuries stared through those unseen eyes. "I am the king who was and will be again. I am the Oathbreaker, the Forgotten, the Silent Wrath. I am your end." Before Alaric could speak, the figure vanished, swallowed not by shadow but by silence itself, leaving behind only the echo of his words. That night, Alaric did not sleep. He stared at the stars hidden behind clouds, wondering if the prophecy had already begun to claim him. For if the shadow of the old king walked once more, then Eldoria's fate was darker than any could imagine.